Welcome back to another episode of Clone or Die, and today we have a very special treat. It is a clone of the M4 as it would have first originally been issued around 1994, 1995 time period, and it's one that I love. This really is a very cool rifle to see where it started and where it is today, and we're going to get into it a little bit. Now, most people will know of me, if you've watched this channel by now, as a GWOT fanboy, like in the era of M81 and DCU, and the M4, the CAC rail, and all the other accessories that go on it. And I do, that's the primary thing I love, I'll admit it. But I kind of wanted to go back to where that started, right before the beginning of the global war on terror. And that would be, originally for the M4, in 1985, is when the project started, and it did not actually result in a finalized rifle that was adopted until 1994. So in typical military fashion, it took them almost 10 years to get to a rifle that was basically the same as what they were already using, just with a detachable carry handle and better feed ramp on the barrel. Now, while Call of Duty has had various XM4s, none of them have been representative of what an actual XM4 would be. They're slightly different than this rifle, what the finalized project would be. They have a slightly different barrel profile, and some would be with or without the removable carry handle, so some would just be the A2 rear sight. But I digress. Getting into the finalized rifle, the M4 project had been going on for a number of years, seeing no end in sight. But a little event happens in 1993, the Battle of Mogadishu. And something noted by the Rangers during that battle were mostly armed with 20-inch M16A2s with a few NCOs with 727s, is they note that the Delta Force operators during that operation were armed with the 14.5 723s, 653s, and the NCOs and Rangers with the 727s were a much handier rifle for urban fighting. Versus a 20-inch M16, I'd rather have this. So that kind of accelerated interest in the project. That accelerated interest in a lot of things, Mogadishu being the first major battle since the Vietnam War. Accelerated in interest in new body armor systems, which would eventually end up being the Interceptor body armor, new helmet systems, which would eventually end up being the Mitch helmet series and the ACH, and accelerated interest in this project of wanting to get a finalized rifles so it could be a new standard issue across the field for special operations like Rangers, as well as replace older weapons still in use for vehicle crews and rear echelon troops. Now, originally, this was not intended to be the mainline service rifle of the US Army, but that changed after they saw the kind of theaters we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the 14.5 weapon system being much more handy than the older 20-inch M16s. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, where does that designation come from? Where does M4 carbine come from? Well, it's pretty easy. In 1942, there was an M1 carbine. In 1945, there was the M2 carbine, same thing, but select fire. And then in 1945 again, there was the M3 carbine. The same thing again, just with a night vision scope. And between 1945 and 1994, there had been no new carbines adopted by the US military. So that's where M4 comes from. It's just the fourth one. As a kind of a funny story though, when this was adopted, standard issue for vehicle crews in the 90s, in 1994, was still M3 grease guns. That was their personal defense backup weapon that was smaller than a 20-inch M16. A lot of crews still had those. Tank crews still had them. Vehicle crews still had them. Fucking this piece of shit World War II tube gun was still being used in 1994. This is obviously a much better option than that is. Fun fact, when I was doing some research for this video, I found that when a lot of units first got their rifles, they didn't get slings for them. So what they did is they took their M3 grease gun slings and they put them on their M4s because that's the rifle it replaced. They had it and it worked, so that's what they used. One thing I should note on this is the color. So M16A1s, M16A2s, 727s, those kinds of guns, Those typically have kind of like a gray parkerized finish-ish. It's not really parkerized because you can't parkerize aluminum, you anodize aluminum. And the reason they appear gray is because they use an older Type 2 aluminum, or aluminum anodizing process. The reason M4s and newer M16A4s appear black is because they use a Type 3 anodizing. Now there's a bit of debate on this online, and I've talked to a few veterans about this, and I've gotten some conflicting reports. Now, we know the M4 and the M4A1 were both adopted. Some people confuse the M4A1 with the upgrade program that the Army did around 2010, upgrading all their burst guns into auto. The A1 existed before that. As to whether or not the earliest M4s were Type 2 anodized and had more of a gray finish versus the later Type 3 with the more black finish. What I was able to find, I found some forum posts from a former Green Beret talking about exactly this because he was cloning one of his early service rifles, and it just seems split. I think at some point, initially, they were the gray, more of, phosphate Type 2 finish, and very early on, they switched that to the Type 3, from what I was able to research. So you might see some that are more gray, you might see some that are black like this. From what I was able to find from the 90s, both are correct. Okay, so in the 90s, what are some of the things they would have changed with this new M4 as opposed to the carbines they were already using? That were the commercial guns, the COTS guns. Well, they retained the government profile barrel as we know it today, the M4 profile with the grenade launcher lug from the 727, but they added M4 feed ramps to the barrel to make it feed more reliably. This sling swivel that goes into the front bayonet lug was actually an improvement off the M4. Granted, how much is this an improvement versus just having paracord off the front sight? To me, it's kind of the same thing. And then paracord doesn't directly interface with the barrel. They added these double heat shield handguards. This would later be replaced with the TAC RAS and the RIS rail systems, but these are as they would have originally come. They're thicker than the original skinny handguards on the older guns. Obviously, they have the detachable carry handle, which is a 13 slot Picatinny rail. Kind of funny to note, actually, the Canadians, they adopted their C7 and C8 with the detachable carry handle before the M4 was adopted. So their system for their Daimaco, I'm not really sure how it's pronounced, is actually a Weaver rail, which is compatible with Picatinny, and they have a 14 slot rail, when the Picatinny rails only have 13 slots, so that might be how you can tell a difference. Another improvement they made was on the buffer tube. They decided to go with a 4-position buffer tube instead of the 3 or 2 positions on the older guns. And for the early guns, they retained the CAR 15 stock. Later, this would be replaced with the LE waffle stock, which in my opinion was a huge downgrade. And then everything else, kind of copied over from your standard M16A2, normal charging handle, normal shitty A2 grip, normal forward assist. None of that changed. Now, what this particular gun is built on is I have a Colt factory M4 upper. It does have the proper government profile barrel, not the original SOCOM. It's a C-stamp keyhole upper, so it's probably an older one. And I have a Colt complete lower parts kit on this gun, and I just have it on a bad attitude lower, which is blank right now. My guy who normally does my engraving hasn't been available. I'll have him put the M4 markings on here when he is available. Not a huge deal for right now. Also, before I forget, as far as for this gun, what I'm running in here is an H1 buffer, just what I had when I built it. Original M4s originally would have come with carbine buffers, and then later on, the H1 and the H2 would be part of the SOCMOD program. For these rifles, the first major combat deployment of them would have been in Kosovo. So that's kind of what I'm representing today, is in 1994 when K4 was deployed as a UN peacekeeping force. It's what I'm representing kind of in the 2000 time period of the 82nd Airborne. Initially, they would be wearing those like Pasget vests, the shitty vests, but as experience we have from Mogadishu and experience from fighting insurgents there, Pasget vests do not stop rifle rounds. They are not good body armor. And the Interceptor does come, but it does come later in 2000. So what do we do as a stopgap? What do they have? Well, they have Ranger body armors. They have plenty of these left over. So they just issue them out to troops in 2000. So you'll see photos of 82nd Airborne walking around with these. Now, by 2000, most 82nd Airborne guys, and obviously Green Berets and other special operations, have the CAC RIS system, the earlier version. But there are a couple photos of guys who still have the round handguards. Obviously going into Iraq and Afghanistan, you'll see plenty of guys with round handguards. I think the big step up for this rifle is in the 80s and 90s, we start to see the modularity of the AR really explored. There's all kinds of attachments coming out to really enhance the capabilities of the weapon. And this gun kind of epitomizes, all right, now we can have red dots where we want them. We don't have to chop the carry handles off anymore. We can have them lower down, more in line with the shooter, less height over bore. Now it's kind of the opposite, where we've gone to super high mounts again. Like if you have a super high mount, it's like, why not just have an M16 carry handle with a rail on it? It's the same height. But I digress. Like, truly, we're exploring the modular nature of the rifle. We have our red dots now. We have our rail systems. We can attach our flashlights directly to the rail. We can attach our IR lasers. No more clamping to the barrel. No more of that bullshit. We have a weapon, even by today's standards, it is a modern fighting rifle. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're talking a lot about Kosovo and K4 in 1999, and you're going, wow, war in the Balkans? I never could have saw that coming. And yeah, it was truly a shock, truly a surprise. They never fight it out over there. Anyway, well, the peacekeeping mission for K4 for Kosovo started in 1999. As of 2025, the United States Army is still in Kosovo, part of K4. So that could tell you how the peacekeeping operation is going there.
War, it's fantastic.
Now, from the research I was able to do, obviously going with the modular nature of this gun, the military wants to have a standardized set of equipment that they can issue to troops. So it's no more COT stuff like the aim points and the Surefire flashlights. They want to standardize. So they come up with the SOPMOD Block 1 program for special operations. And SOPMOD does change over time, of course. But in the 90s, I spoke to a Green Beret who was issued this rifle originally. And he said, when they first got the rifles in 1994-ish, towards the end, they were like this. They didn't have anything on them. There were guys that ran their attachments from the older carbines. You'll see like some Delta Force photos like that of guys with M4s and they're running EOTech on the carry handles and stuff. Just what they were used to, just what they like. I understand it. They said about 6 months later, after they first got their rifles, they started to get the CAC RIS railed handguards, so they could really start to use that nature. And then about 6 months after that, they started to get more of the SOPMOD attachments, so it would have been the early ACOG day-night sight, the shitty one, as well as the normal 4X ACOG. There would have initially been Pack 4s and then later Pack 2s. Their shitty the VIL illuminator sight, those were really garbage, and they were dumped pretty quickly for SOPMOD. They were plastic flashlights, so most guys stuck with the Surefire 660s into the GWOT. As well as, you know, the quick detach grenade launcher, all of the accoutrement that comes with that program on a new standardized rifle with a new standardized set of attachments. All right, so that was a little bit of a history lesson of kind of your 1994 to 2000 early M4, you know, Kosovo deployment. I'll probably do a little bit more in-depth video. I didn't go too much into the trials and the history of that, just briefly over it. On an XM4, I'll do that in a later video, as well as more of the GWOT, what we know, M4, you know, your aim point, your PEC 2, all that goodies. I'll cover that in a later video as well. But I just kind of wanted to start at the beginning of what we know as the M4, just because of the legend that it has become. And that was it for the M4 on today's video. I'll see you in the next corner, guys.